Yeah.
I said, Dad, I'll give you $200 for the dog. I just don't want her to stay in the kennel.
I got your motivation right here. Right here. How can you steal the dog when the dog's right there? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Some say these two trainers were quietly in the shadows. Robert Weatherwax, last of the legendary Lassie trainers, from the world's greatest movie dog training family, was quietly hidden in his TV work. And Christoph Clugston, elite action K9 trainer, was traveling from the sub-zero Arctic to the sweltering jungle heat, training dogs on 3 continents. But a chance meeting changed all of that. Now, Robert and Christoph have joined forces and they're breaking the silence. For the first time, the secretive and hidden world of the movie dog trainer and the science of the elite tactical trainer will be revealed. That's right, they are out of the shadows. Welcome to Tactical Practical.
This is Christoph Clugston, the K9 action dog trainer, and I'm with Robert Weatherwax, movie TV dog trainer, and also a pet dog behaviorist. And we're going to talk about what Robert considers the #1 method of training dogs. And I'm doing that to build it up a little bit. But anyway, so what is the #1 way to train dogs, Robert? What's the best way?
Well, I've always felt that a motivational approach is the best approach, not only for the dog in the way that they learn, but also in the way that they turn out afterwards, right? We don't want to do anything that changes the dog's personality. We want to tap into the things that the dog wants to do. And if they don't want to do something, we instill a desire for them to do it. So, for example, if I've done this with my clients, sometimes I run into a nervous dog, we can't get him out the front door. So I use the owner, right? I'll send the owner out and I'll come behind the dog. Well, the dog's afraid of me and wants to be with their owner. So I get the dog out the door. I didn't even have to touch him. All I had to do was position myself in such a way that the dog could figure it out on their own. It's kind of like when a dog is on a stay and you're going stay, 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 and you're backing away, stay, 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 and you're doing all this stuff. And it's just a stay, right? You only have to stay at one time. What they're afraid of, and that's, to me, the anti-motivational style, is when you don't allow a dog to make a mistake. Because if the dog makes a mistake, he's going to learn to do it to avoid whatever he loses when he makes a mistake. In my case, he loses reward. He doesn't get reprimanded. He just loses reward. And I think that's a lot of it, too. A lot of trainers, and I'm not saying anybody in particular, but there are a lot of trainers, because I see them out there working in parks and stuff and trails, and they're wanting this dog to look at them all the time and be under their control, right, and always worried about getting too far away from them, and worrying about them making a mistake, and worrying about them acting out when they see another dog. It's like all these things have to happen. The only way they can not happen in the future is for them to happen now. Mm-hmm. So don't be afraid to make a mistake, and let the dog figure things out on their own. Don't spoon feed the dog. Yeah. It's a happy medium. You give him some clues, and then he tries to do it. If he fails, you redirect it. And there's nothing wrong with doing something over again. It's not like, oh, we have to do it on the first time. How many times have I had the dog work perfectly on a set, only to have the actors screw around and have to take cut, and they're all laughing. It's all funny. But then if the dog screws up, right, it's like, oh my God, this dog is not going to be able to do it. He can't do it. So I think that when we're talking about motivational, we're really just talking about giving a dog a reason to do something, not because you're telling them to.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things there that are crucial for everyone to understand. One of the giant differences that between what we do, how we come from the same, we don't exactly do the same things, but we do 90-something% of the same things. And one of those is that separates us, and it also separates all great tactical and movie guys, is that we don't need the dog focused looking at us constantly, which is what you just said, and that's what you're going to see. Pet dog trainers have taken that from sport dog trainers, especially the IGP people who teach the stargazing healing, where the dog is looking up, and that's done by focusing on the handler. That's one of the start of the training that. And they want the dog looking at them at all times. So that doesn't work for movies, and it doesn't work for real tactical situations. When I want the dog looking at me, when I'm worried about people in the jungle, the enemy in the jungle. No, I don't want the dog looking at me. So the dog has got to learn how to operate on his own. And once again, getting into sled dogs and hunting dogs, they have to work on their own. We have got to put them in positions where they are able to work on their own. And like I said once in one of our other podcasts, we really want to trick the dog into thinking that he came up with the idea. He came up with the idea to do, whatever we want him to do. And some of these things become self-rewarding in the long run. They may not be initially, but they are in the long run, especially with movement. Dogs get a lot of reinforcement from movement. And one of the keys, because I give out a lot of secrets here and there, so does Robert, but about our method. And one of the things is reinforcement and reset. Reinforcement or reset. Resetting the dog, which is what Robert was talking about, is an operant conditioning things is called negative punishment, which is the same thing. The way I can teach everybody that very quickly is the Pink Floyd song. How can you have your pudding if you haven't eaten your meat? How can you have your pudding if you haven't eaten your meat? Right. So that's negative punishment. You're taking away something that somebody wants, or the animal or whatever wants. And so that's the easiest way. So a lot of people get bogged down. They can't keep up with the actual technical terms and stuff. But anyway, that's what's going on there. So there's resetting the dog. And it happens
a lot in housebreaking too, because when you're housebreaking a dog, instead of reprimanding them for what they did wrong, take away something, which in this case would be their freedom. They would either be put in a crate that's has newspaper on the bottom of it, or a puppy pen, something that says you can't be all over the house now because you lost that, because you didn't go where you're supposed to go. And that's motivational, because there's something for them to lose. We're not taking anything away from them. They're losing it.
Well, it's their action, right? It's their consequence to their action is what's happening. And then they figure that out, is the point, though. They're not earthworms. We want the dog to be happy about what they're doing, because they're going to do it. They're going to do it more. They're going to do it more often, and they're going to move faster if you want them to. That we talked about before is when we were talking about the Powell and the iconic greatest scene maybe ever done, when he swims across the river and comes out and it does things in slow motion and crawls and then goes on his side and he's exhausted and he doesn't shake and all that stuff. All that was done through voice. The dog is doing that because there's a strong underlying motivational foundation set there. It wasn't just like Rudd just started doing that day. It's because the dog has got a strong foundation. So you're building the self-confidence of the dog, right?
Right. It's kind of like when we're sending a dog, because when I worked on the set, the dog didn't just appear out of nowhere. We didn't put him on a 100-yard stay and then tell him to go. Right.
Yeah.
We had another trainer. Back there. Yeah. Holding the dog back, and the more we held the dog back, the more the dog wanted to get to the point B, right? Yeah. So, we could adjust the dog's speed by either doing a drag release where we'd slow him down a little bit, or we'd hold him back and then just spring our arms open and let him go, because the speed is a lot of it. And if a motivational trainer knows how to control speed, because a dog doing an easy, for example, that's an example of motivation combined with control, because you got to get the dog to go forward before you can slow him down. You got to get the car moving before you can apply the brakes. Yeah. So motivational training gets the dog on their way, and then training happens from there.
Well, yeah, and a lot. Some people listening, this is really advanced stuff, actually, because this isn't. You're not going to hear this down the street at the pet company or whatever. You're not going to hear it because they don't know it. Number one, they don't know it. They can't do it. And this is about really a deep psychological understanding of the dog, all sorts of animals, because it's sort of the forbidden fruit, right? When you're doing a restraint, which is one of the ways you can teach. I'll give you people secrets. One of the ways you can teach a better recall. So you have a second person doing the restraining of the dog and building up the tension on the dog, because now the dog wants to go to you because it's a forbidden fruit, especially when you're moving away from the dog. If you're moving away from the dog and they're restraining the dog, and then they let the dog go, and that's a whole sequence of events. But that builds a stronger go-to or recall than just putting the dog there and, hey, dog, come.
Right, because we can actually, a lot of the idea, as I mentioned in my book, is that you want to get the dog away from you. It's hard to get motivation from a dog that's standing right in front of you, unless what you're trying to do is get them to go up or sideways. But as far as going forward, you need to extend the distance. So that the dog is more focused. They feel like they're losing something, right? Because you're drifting further away, and you're also going to get looks through movement. So if you're moving, they're like, what are you doing? Because dogs are very visual. You've mentioned many times. Dogs are very visual, so sometimes waving a towel. When I was doing those long recalls with Lassie, I'd have to run up the hill with a towel in my hand, and there's another trainer holding the dog at the bottom, and then all it's a matter of doing at that point is releasing the dog. But we can't get that dog up that big hill unless we have them going, at top speed right from the beginning, because we know they're going to slow down.
Right.
So we just want them to come out hot out of the gate and teach them that, and then before we worry about control, we want to have distance, and then you combine the two, and you have control from a distance.
Well, one of the things that I've harped on many times, and I'm going to keep doing it, and one of the things that initially when I ran across Robert's stuff was that, hey, he's talking about distance. He's talking about working at a distance and how we scoff at close stuff. We scoff at it because everybody should be able to train a dog to do things within 3 to 6 feet or whatever, which a lot of people struggle with, and they talk about that as if it was some giant achievement. No, I mean, look, okay, again, I'm going to plug myself. Look, I got a quarter-mile sit-stay, quarter-mile recall. How do you get there? You don't get there with the way these people are trying to do it on the 6-foot leash and stuff like that. We're getting there by using distance, by having distance, and our goal is always distance. That's one of the things I want to get across, is that you're talking about that too. Our goal is distance. We want to have, and so do shepherds using herding dogs for cattle or for sheep or whatever. They're using that there at a long distance. And by the way, too, I get really kind of weirded out. Like, we're talking about hand signals and arm signals at a distance, which is what waving the towel is. In fact, all these people want to get into these little, like, oh, look at my pinky move. The dog, why are you trying to make it difficult on the dog? I get really irritated with people. Like, we start out with this big motion, but then we get down to, why are you doing that? Why are you not trying to make it clear to the dog and easy for the dog to understand? That's like me, what did I say? I'm clipping the words. It's the same sort of. Why are you not trying to make the dog successful? That, I think, right there is a big key to this, isn't it? It's the fact that the motivational approach is trying to make the dog successful. Let them fail, but then let them get successful.
And leaving it on a high note. Whenever I do a session, and let's say I've gotten 12 to 15 minutes per session, and the dog starts to mess up a little bit. Maybe he's getting a little mentally fatigued. I'll try to get a successful completion of whatever I'm trying to get them to do before I give them a break. I never want to end the session failing, because that carries over to the next lesson, and that motivation that you had in that first session is going to carry over to the second session if you leave it on a high note. So never get exasperated and give up, because that's sending a message to your dog that training is no fun, and this is not really something we want to do again.
And I'll give people a free one here, a free secret. Free secret! Here it is. Tune in. Listen up, people. Okay, so you're working on something new, and you're trying to do it, and the dog is doing it. Like I said before, you need to do it in a structure where they get 80% of it before you move on. Okay, so let's say that they're not making 80%, and it's not even at the 50% mark, and it's looking like it's dropping down. So how do you end on a high note? Well, you drop back to something else that they already know and that they can do well. So whatever that might be, you go.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so then the dog, and you make a big deal about it too, like, what the hell? I cannot believe how great you are. To the dog, I'm saying that. I'm not telling you that, Robert. I'm telling that to the dog.
Right.
So anyway, so you make a big deal. They do something, whatever, whatever. Give me your paw or whatever, sit or something, whatever. And you do that, and then you end it. You end it right there, people. You don't try to go back. You just end it right there, because what'll happen is they'll bounce back up when the next training session. They'll bounce. They'll come back up higher. So there's a, if you want to call it underlying madness or but there's underlying logic, and we're coherent about what we're trying to do. It is structured. It may seem to people on the outside that we're not following a structured thing, but we are. I'm following a very structured type of training. It varies with each dog, though. That's what we don't have a global approach where it's going to be exactly the same with each dog, and that's what we've tried to get across. And that's one of the reasons why movie guys, I'm saying as trainers, are better than other people, because they're using all sorts of different dogs, and they've got to be able to. We've talked about reading dogs, sort of. You have to read the dog, and you have to match your training to the dog. You can't make the dog. Well, he's not learning the way that I taught the German Shepherd. Yeah, of course, because he's whatever.
He's a basset hound. He's a basset hound.
Yeah, I know. We have certain breeds we always pick on, though, I've noticed.
Chihuahuas, basset hound. Yeah.
I was gonna say a lasso opso. You know what I mean? Yeah. Have you trained many of those handbag dogs like?
Oh yeah, everything from Shih Tzus, Yorkies,
Yeah.
Pomeranians, Maltese, Yorkie. I said Yorkies,
Yeah.
Silkies, Chihuahuas. Yeah, Beagles.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
the list goes on.
And it's different, isn't it? That's what I'm getting to. It's different than. I mean, it's vastly different than trying to work with, say with like Betty that you had, right? Or
Yeah, they don't have natural motivation. You have to actually develop it,
Yeah.
because if the dog wasn't designed to do anything historically, like hunting or
Yeah.
herding or whatever it is, they don't have the motivation. And it's so easy for you to say, "Oh, I don't need motivation because I have a naturally motivated dog." But the idea is you're not always going to have a naturally motivated dog, so you have to learn how to give it to him yourself.
Right, and that's one of the things too. Like, again, I'm going to hit it because look, people, rise to the challenge. Don't cave in and I'm a millennial, I'm a sub-millennial, and I can't handle it. And okay, look, I'm doing things with an American Bulldog that other people are not doing with an American Bulldog. People can do that stuff with Border Collies because of exactly what you're saying. Because the motivation for a Bulldog is not the same as it is with a Border Collie. I mean, Border Collies. I mean, they can get psychologically hurt if you look at them the wrong way, can't they?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's the big picture. I think what happens with people when they train their dogs, whether that's trainers or owners, they get so caught up in the mission, and when it's going badly, they get discouraged. I mean, you have to have a big picture approach. Like you said, often that bad lesson is followed by their best lesson.
Yeah.
Because now it's kind of had a time to sink in a little bit, and then they come in and all of a sudden, wow, that's like 10 times better than the last lesson. You're going to have a clunker. You're always going to have that clunker lesson, but understand that the clunker comes just before you hit the finish line, and don't lose track of where you're trying to go, not where you are at this very moment.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you start out; it's where you end up. That's always
right.
the thing. Then that's with everything. It's the same thing with physical training. You can't just constantly progress like this. You're not going to. There's going to be up and downs. There's peaking. You're going to peak, and the same thing happens mentally, emotionally, and happens with everything. It's not just physical. I've got some dogs. Speaking of running around right now, they're in their hyper mode. The overall paradigm that you have to have, and that's what we're talking. We're talking about our paradigm. And if people are interested, of course, we going into some details here, and we answer people who are subscribers. I do. I answer their comments, but also, hey, you got to hit us up for consultations or clinics or seminars, or if you want your dog trained, you happen to live in East Texas where Robert's at, or if you're in northeastern Oklahoma, I'll train your dog also. But what I'm getting to is that if you have a snag, there are solutions for you with us, and you should take advantage of that because the two of us together have got more experience than anybody that's on YouTube. That's for certain by a long shot. I just saw somebody was talking about I have 8 years, 8 years, a drop in the bucket, Junior. You know what I mean? 8 years, and they were acting as if there was the veteran of everything. And it's like 8 years. Ooh. So it doesn't get to me. I have to bring that up because you want to look at the things like why are we able to talk about these things and have a different point of view because we've been doing it a really long time and we come from a different perspective. And this is the whole thing that we're talking about that's motivational. The whole movie tactical training paradigm is different than everybody else's stuff. Yeah, anything you want to add to that? Because I feel like sometimes that I need to say that to people because they're like, well, I'm watching all these other videos. Yeah, because they don't know what we know. Number one. Number two, they're not training from this frame of mind, or they're not training the same type of dogs. I mean, you're doing pet dogs. I do pet dogs also. But outside of just the pet dogs, can they do something else? That's what we have done, and that's our best. But anyway, yeah, you have things that you want to.
No, I can definitely add something. There's a story I like to tell a lot. It's about this mastiff, this young 6-month mastiff. It was a female, and the guy called me and he said, my dog sleeps all the time. He doesn't want to do anything. I said, well, how's his health? Have you had it checked out? Oh yeah, he's fine. He's just lazy. He doesn't want to do anything. So I took him outside with a long leash. We did a little playing with the ball, and we did some recall. We got him moving. We got into a program of just getting the dog moving, getting him off his butt, getting him used to running and playing and walking. And a lot of it was because the guy never took this huge dog and stuck him in the house and didn't really understand that this dog needs a certain amount of activity in order to stay sharp. And it's not so much with the little dogs, the little arm dogs that you were talking about. Those dogs don't need that. They were designed to be carried. They weren't out there to chase down rabbits or greyhounds, whatever they're supposed to be doing. This is not what they were designed for. So later on, after I'd worked with the dog a couple lessons, the guy calls me back and he says, the dog's too active now. Can you slow him down? I'm like, well, yeah, see, but you have to get him going before you can slow him down. That's what I meant when I said you got to get the car moving before you can apply the brakes. So don't be thinking about what the dog can't do. Think about what the dog is good at, and then start putting, constraints on the things that they're already doing well. We always want to bust through the wall before we go back and rebuild it. So, and of course, the distance is really important, and you can't develop distance if you have to have constant control. And there's a lot of times when I'm looking at a dog, and because I want them to do something on a set, like maybe I want them to speak or I want them to put their head down. So I do want a certain amount of control. But then when the dog is flying there, I'll turn my head. I won't even make any eye contact because I don't want the dog to be motivated by something I do that isn't really supposed to be motivation at all. So I'll break eye contact completely so that the dog doesn't misinterpret anything that I'm trying to tell them. And then when the script says that the dog now has to exit the room, then I'll give them the cue to exit, and then somebody else will pick them up on the other end. And that's motivational because the dog always has a place they're going. They're not seeing the brick wall, they're seeing the window and how they could get through that brick wall, right?
Right, and it goes back to what we've talked about, that we're constantly different than everyone else. One of the major ways, and if you go back, if you haven't been listening to our podcast talks, go back and listen to the prior ones because you'll see that we're actually building something here, because we've talked about how come to us location is everything, not position, and that was another example of where the dog is trained for location, not for position, and we've talked about that in many different ways. But those of you who have been listening to us things should start coming together a little bit for you and start. Oh, these guys, there is something. They're not just doing stuff like everyone else. We're not doing stuff like everyone else, and that's why. There's a saying, do what you've always done, get what you've always gotten. So when you watch a bunch of other people's videos, you're going to see variations on the same theme, but we're not doing the same theme. we're we're
Right.
we're playing in a totally different key than they're playing on a different instrument too. So that's why if you compare us to the other people, well, plus we don't have that Johnny Carson, Ed McMahon thing going on that a lot of podcasts have going on.
Right.
We're both contributing to your information, and this is, of course, about information. It's not about entertainment. Too many people want to be entertained, but this is instruction. You know, it's, hey, you're going to become a surgeon. It's not about being entertained while you're learning to be a surgeon. The same thing here. It's about the quality of the education you're getting, and so I think that what we're doing is incredibly invaluable. But getting back to this, people should start to see that things are coming together, because we've talked about a lot of components, not every component, but we've talked about it. And once again, a better way when you start to see this, like, oh, I'm beginning to learn these things. It's making sense. I can watch movies and I can see it. Now, not every movie trainer or TV trainer is doing exactly the same things we're talking about, but there are things that are global, like the marks are going to be global. But some of the other things, and that's why Rudd was great, because he was doing things that other people weren't doing. Lee Duncan, again, I want to use the older names because that's out there for people, and it's undeniable what they did, and it was before CGI and a bunch of other things, so that you can't throw that in there as a cover up. Plus, you know, they're gone, so we should give credit to where credit's due, basically. Not to get away from the motivational. Is something else you want to add to like the basis?
No, I just want people to start thinking about where they're positioned when it comes to their dog, and start out. You know, if you're using a 4-foot leash and you're going for 20-foot distance, it's not going to work. You need to have a long leash so that you don't need a leash at some point, period. There's no way that you can get from a short leash to no leash at all without that intermediary long leash, because that's what gets you from one island to the other island. And you have to understand that motivation helps them achieve that. It also helps you train the dog faster, because now they're more excited about it. I mean, have you ever been in class, and this one class is so boring, and you get C's, you don't understand why, you can't grasp anything, the teacher is boring, the stuff is boring, and then you go to this other class, and it's just so easy because the teacher makes it interesting, and you're doing things that stimulate the learning process. And I feel like that's what we have to do. And you mentioned something very important. If they're struggling with one thing, go back to something they're good at, so that they can start to feel, oh yeah, I am smart. And keep in mind too, Dr. Laura, I always mention this to my clients because I think it's really important. You do not get self-esteem. Self-esteem is not given to you. By telling somebody, oh, they're good, they're great, you're good, yes, that's fine. You tell your kid, good job, but your kid's going to get better when they do something they didn't think they could do. It's the same thing with the dog, because they impress themselves. You're not telling them they're good. They prove it to themselves that they're good. And that's what motivational training is all about. It's all about proving to the dog that they can do it themselves, that they don't really need to be spoon-fed the way so many trainers do. And when you spoon-feed your dog, you stay in neutral. You never really move forward. If you do, you move at such a slow pace that you'll never get there in any reasonable amount of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And but speaking of that long thing, you see that photo of my dog climbing the rocks? That was
oh yeah,
that was 100-foot leash. Let me tell you, I hate those things. I mean, trying to get that.
Well, didn't you start out? You had to be on that rock yourself in the beginning, right? You can't just say, "Go over to the rock."
Yeah, I can sit. I mean, that dog is motivated.
Well, now you can. You can, but you started out using yourself as the motivation, right? Is that not right?
Well, depending, because that's my jungle dog, so that's different than these.
But you probably don't even remember when he didn't know anything. Now you can.
Yeah.
Now he learns so much quicker because he has this huge foundation that you've given him.
but my point is, like, man, you do not want to have to reel in 100-foot leash. I'm just telling you. I'm telling you, it's just a nightmare. I mean, it's a nightmare. And then if you got anybody else on the trails, you're like, what in the hell are you doing? And it's like, yeah, it's like, yeah, you just tell them stuff. I'm fishing with my dog. That's what I'm doing. He's going out there and he's.
And a lot of people struggle with that long leash. I mean, you use 100 feet, I use 50 feet, and a lot of people have problems with the 15-footer. They're all wrapped around and they're like, oh my god, I got too much leash, and
Yeah.
and it's like I said, just throw that stuff on the ground. Hold the leash where you need. Hold the head of the cobra, right?
Yeah.
Don't be holding its tail, because if you hold the cobra's tail, he's going to turn around and bite you. Just make sure that you have control of the top of the leash. Let the other stuff drag. It can slide through your hand, so that you can let the dog go out and then call him back, because you can't call a dog to you if he never is more than 3 feet away from you in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
you almost want him to. I mean, I tell my clients when we're doing training in the yard, I'm like, okay, I give them the end of the long leash, and this is when we're getting the heel honed down, which all started out from the recall. So we're getting that heel down, and I'm always telling the client to, now, if the dog's right next to you, take a sharp turn and see if the dog's paying attention. And you keep doing that, and then when the dog gets to you, they get paid. So they're learning, and they're always getting paid in the place you want them to end up, not where you want them to start.
Right.
So they're only going to remember how the book ends. They're not going to remember chapter 5. They're only going to remember the happy ending and where I get paid and I get the squeak toy and Daddy's happy with me. Don't try to talk to a dog in sentences. Just use words and syllables that mean something to the dog, and keep it simple. Kiss. Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah. Well, and something I'll add about the leashes actually is the fact that biothane is far better. The leashes don't snag, they don't snarl and stuff. And when the 100-foot ones I was using was a nylon on that stuff, knots, and it's just insanity. So there are better materials you can be using for these leashes is what I'm getting to. Biothane is everything. I use biothane for everything now, and it's better because it doesn't get wet and soggy, and it's easy to clean off. It doesn't snag, it won't knot and all that stuff. It's much better, and that's what all tax.
I'd love to teach a course on just how to use a long leash.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, that's part of, we're doing seminars and workshops. There's a lot of things we can focus on if people are interested. Like, there's a workshop on the 50-foot leash. That's definitely something I think people would be interested in. For one of the things, marks, definitely the whole thing we can do on marks, and there's more than one way to teach marks, people, by the way. There's some ways are a little convoluted. I know them, but they're convoluted. I wouldn't use them. To me, I got a pretty clear way that I try to do it, but some dogs won't get it that way. So that's why we have to have so many different. We don't just have one method. That's the point. That's something I want to get across too. We don't just have one method. I know 6-7 ways to do nearly everything we're trying to do, and that's what I was talking about the American Bulldog. Because you can't train that guy like you're training a Border Collie. It won't work, and that's why these trick trainers can't train a dog his size or his weight, or let alone an American Bulldog. They can't do it. So this is the thing. It's like one of these things. What I'm trying to get across to people is we have a wealth of information, and it's not bragging when it's true. And if we don't tell you, you're never going to know. So this is the world we live in: advertising and telling facts about things. If Robert goes and hides, nobody's going to know because people don't know. They don't associate the name Weatherwax with Lassie. Everyone still knows Lassie. They remember Lassie because they see the photos. They still see the photos everywhere, and because everybody gets with the music. I mean, the one music that they use, it always gets everybody emotional, doesn't it?
Yeah, that was Green Sleeve.
Yeah. It gets everybody emotional. I mean, yeah, I remember it. When it came on when I was, so it triggers you off. But you don't know Weatherwax. We got to glue it back together. Lassie Weatherwax, Lassie Weatherwax. I mean, we got.
Well, when my grandfather and my dad were training, there was no social media, there was no
Right.
internet, and
Yeah.
and my dad's retired and Rudd's long past, and
Yep.
and as far as learning the method that my grandfather taught,
Yeah.
there's only one place you're going to learn that,
Yeah.
and that's right here.
Yeah.
And of course, the reason that I'm working with you is because I respect you and I know that you'll understand the concepts that I'm talking about,
Yeah.
and as opposed to trying to get on the same page with somebody who's only done it, like you say, for 8 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Training was so much different 30 years ago. I mean, these were the pioneers. These are the people that
Yeah.
we're all copying now, right?
Yeah. Or people think we came up with this revolutionary idea. Lee Duncan was using it over 100 years ago, and he wasn't the first one, but Rin Tin Tin, in my opinion, my esteemed, incredible opinion, has not been equaled as an action dog. Not for one dog. Not for he has never been equaled on what was done, and people will not do what Lee did. I mean, I know Frank Inn for a fact said, I would never do some of the stuff he did because it's so dangerous what he did. He had the dog jump off a moving train.
I know.
And he jumped between two buildings 2 stories up. People don't do that. You're risking, and plus, he loved that dog too. By the way, I mean, really loved the dog. You're risking the dog. I won't risk my dogs. I mean, if they have a harness with one of those lines on them, okay, but I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that stuff. Anyway, my point being is that yes, so we have to try to accomplish a few things. We have to let people know there's a different way of training. We got to let them know that hey, there's still a connection to the Lassie thing, and then of course we share a connection to Carl Miller.
Carl Miller.
Yeah, which is I think it's a shame more people don't know him outside of the industry, and I have no clue what I mean, I don't know what the industry's like now. I mean, whatever.
Hey, I think outside of Lassie, Carl's resume is actually even more impressive than my father's, because of course you got to consider too that my dad worked on Lassie for over 10 years, so that counts for a lot. But as far as credits, like just the list of credits, Carl's is huge.
Well,
he did things, all kinds of stuff. Like very versatile trainer. He could do. He was known for action, but he could do touching scenes. He did Beethoven, and I did it with him. We did Canine. He knows how to get emotion out of a dog. But what he's really good at is motivating a dog. Getting a dog to like in Cujo. You saw Cujo with the Saint Bernard.
Yep.
I'm not going to tell you the secret to that one, but how do you get a dog to bang their head into the side of a car? Well, that's because you have to give them the motivation to think they can do it, right?
Yeah.
So, and you don't get that by stopping them and starting them and stopping them and starting them. You have to let them complete the action so that they know where the destination is. It's just like when you get a dog into a car. I always tell people, oh, you're doing it all wrong. You're getting the dog to jump in the car, but you have the other door closed.
Yep.
The dog has to see a window. They have to get in one car and see that they can go through that all the way through the car and get out the other side. Because the dog has to see a destination. There has to be a destination.
It's got to be no big deal, too. It's got to be no big
Right.
deal. A lot of people I trained not too long ago, somebody said, hey, my dog won't get in the car. And it's like, yeah, because they're making they're making a big deal about it, like it's climbing Everest or something, what I'm saying? And you just turn it around to like, hey, yeah, we're getting in the car, no big deal.
Well, here's another thing, a mistake that they make is they go around the car themselves.
Yeah.
But they want the dog to go through the seats, right?
Yeah.
So you have to go through. If you want the dog, you have to lead by example. You can't show them a different route and expect them to go on this route. You have to show them what you want as if you were a dog yourself. And I know this because I was a dog myself.
Yeah,
so I know exactly.
Yeah,
I know what it's like to play tug-of-war with a dog with my own mouth.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I lost a lot of my baby teeth because the dogs pulled them out. That's
I
fine.
know. Well, this is a very unique whole life, really. That's one of the things I've touched on it a little bit. I'm trying to hold it back. I don't want to delve into it because I feel like this is for the people who show more interest and show more commitment to wanting to learn. We'll delve into it, but it's really a I mean, a lot of people could say, "Man, Robert, you're messed up from that."
I probably am. yeah, I probably am.
You know what I'm saying? Because if you really start explaining it, they're going to be like, because in their mind, they're like, "Oh yeah, this guy, all right, whatever. He grew up with whatever Lassie, and there were some dogs around." No, they don't get it. They don't get it. They do not get it. No. They don't have an inkling of the idea. I mean, they don't get it. They don't have an understanding.
Well, I tell them, they say, how do you know what the dog's going to do? How do you know what they're thinking? I said, I always know. I'm psychotic.
Well,
I mean psychic.
Yeah, well, both. He's both. He's
I'm psychotic and I'm psychic. Yeah.
That might be a good pitch. We should pitch a show. That might be,
Yeah.
that might be a good pitch. But I understand. I mean, I understand. So that's a unique thing, and that's another aspect. Like, I mean, it's laughable. I'm going to attack. I'm not mentioning names, but there's people with less than 8 years who act like, "Whoa, I've been doing it for 2 years." Ooh, 2 years. And but anyway, acting like 8 years. Well, really? Did you grow up with the dogs? Were you fighting them for food? I mean, were you tug of warring with the dog bowl with them? I mean, Well, I don't have. You don't. You're missing the point. You don't have the level of depth and knowledge and experience that brings.
Because there's just an inherent understanding that you can't learn in a textbook, and that comes from training dogs. I asked my dad once. I said, "Dad, how do you become such a good trainer?" He says, "You train a lot of dogs. That's how. You just train a lot of dogs."
Yeah.
And that was it. That was the explanation. I said, "Okay, I guess I got to train a lot of dogs."
Yeah.
And I did.
Yeah. At a lot of different types too. A lot of different types. So that's where I've talked about this before. It's like the people get stuck in their niches and they become good dog trainers with one type of dog, like German Shepherds or something, or Springer Spaniels, or Pointers with gun dog guys. But they don't know how to train. They don't know how to train a Doberman, or they don't know how to train a Malinois. Or now you got people who only doing Malinois and they expect every dog to respond with a heavy ball drive, and they don't have ball drive. They don't know how to train them. Like the U.S. military now, they wash out any dog who doesn't have ball drive, because their whole training now is set around ball drive, which is okay, it's whatever, right? But if the dog doesn't have ball drive, they're out of the program, because that's the only way that they know how to train. And with that many people, they're training them in one method. That's it, one method.
Well, I think what helped me growing up is that my dad always gave me the tough dogs. He gave me the dogs that were projects. He didn't give me a good dog right out of the gate. He said, work with these messed up dogs, work with these low motivational dogs, and then if you can train them, I'll give you this German Shepherd to train.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that. And collies, they're hard to train. They may be herding dogs, but they're not motivated like a border collie is.
Yeah. Not the rough collies. No, people don't understand that. Like, they're suspicious too, and they're not German Shepherds. People start, everyone is watching Lassie and they're thinking, "Whoa, this dog's like a German Shepherd." I mean, because Lassie is more or less acting like a German Shepherd, and it's like, no, that's not the way it really is. But didn't your dad? Let's just give a little tidbit, and then we'll end it. Didn't your dad, like, once you got a dog good, didn't he steal him back? Didn't your dad take the dog back?
Yeah. Well, this is a story that I talked about in my book, but I had a dog named Betty. That was the first dog I trained, the one that ended up in Dennis and Menace, and top dog. And I said, "Dad, so can I train a dog? What dog can I train?" And he's like, well, he took me out of the kennel and he showed me this dog that was kind of hiding in the corner. It was Betty, and I'm like, "You train this dog, and don't worry about screwing her up, because she'll never work anyway." So I said, okay. So I trained the dog. She got really good, and she started getting jobs. And not just for my dad, but for his competitors. And she started to get a reputation. People were calling, wanting Betty all the time. And then I had bought that. At a certain point, I bought the dog for my dad before all these calls came in.
Yeah.
I said, Dad, I'll give you $200 for the dog. I just don't want her to stay in the kennel. I want her to live at my house with me. So I brought her home. And then later on, when she started working, my dad said, yeah, Robbie, he stole that dog from me. He stole Betty. I'm like, what are you talking about? You said the dog would never work.
How can you steal the dog when the dog's right there? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I stole him, and I live on the other side of the hill. Like,
Yeah,
I don't think it was a very good hiding place,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
he could get there in 5 minutes and take the dog back.
Yeah, you had to break in late at night, and you had to know the combination and stuff, and then you had to throw a bag over the dog, and then get the dog out, and then he's looking down.
Yeah, it's like Manny Pacquiao. I was living in a mobile home park, and I had like people with machine guns, like Manny Pacquiao, walking around the mobile home park. Just to make sure my dad didn't come try to steal the dog back.
Yeah. We're mildly interesting, to say the least. We're mildly interesting, but
we can be. We have the potential to be interesting.
Yeah, that's true. Well, yeah.
We have the motivation to be interesting.
Yeah, right. But you're always learning things. The main thing is you're always learning things, and so the key word here to remember, people, is motivation. Be motivated. I could go off on.
Think of cheerleaders. Think of pom poms. Think of excitement.
Yeah. Think of taking us to Las Vegas. That's what you should think of, people. I want you to think deeply on that, okay? And to check with us about our schedules. But I think we can work something out.